The real estate market in Atlanta has changed so much this year. What's the latest on the supply and demand? We've got you covered right here. So at the beginning of the year, there was more demand, than we've ever seen in Atlanta for real estate purchases. And the supply and demand, it was so out of whack. And that's what led to, 20 offers, 30 offers, people going 10, 20% over asking price. We got to a point in June this year where the demand started to decrease. And so this is really interesting. Throughout the rest of the year, demand has decreased, but you know what else has decreased? The supply of new listings. So you have demand going down and the number of new listings coming down as well. And so are those coming down together where supply and demand have stayed the same, or is one going down faster than the other? Well, what we're seeing is demand has gone down faster than supply. Not crazy faster, but definitely faster. And so what that's led to right now is you do have more supply relative to demand than you've had in a while. And when I say a while, I'm not talking about like 10 years ago, 2012. I'm talking a while like 2 years ago, the pandemic years. You do have more supply right now than you've had over the last couple years. But this is interesting. It feels like a lot relative to earlier in the year that like, man, things are moving slowly. It's taking a long time for houses to sell, but they're actually selling faster and there is less supply than there was in 2019, which if you could ask anyone in 2019, hey, how's the market right now? People would be like, man, it's a seller's market. It's a great time to sell your house. And it's actually statistically better right now for sellers. So I think that's interesting just from a comparison standpoint. You might be like, hey, how do we track supply and demand, early on? Because you can track it when things close, but the real estate sales cycle is pretty long, right? From someone starts looking to when they actually close on a property. Well, what we're seeing on the showings, the number of showings per listing has been declining since June, and it's steadied out the last couple months, which tells us that we're getting to a steady place where the demand in the market is pretty steady. The number of houses for sale, as I mentioned, those have decreased as well relatively, year over year. There's actually less houses coming on the market each month this year than there were a year ago. But the amount of supply is rising because they are not selling at a rate that is as fast. So are we coming to an inflection point? Well, what would an inflection point be? That'd be when we would turn from a seller's market to a buyer's market. We're definitely not there. Historically, they say 6 months of inventory is where it's a balanced market. Buyers and sellers are on equal footing. And we're only around 3 in Metro Atlanta. So we've got a ways to go to get to where it is a balanced market. Now that's crept up from, less than 1 at some points earlier this year, but it's definitely still it's good for sellers. Now, what does this mean for you on the buyer or seller side, like right now? Well, typically, as we go to the end of the year, buyer demand continues to go down. Just not as many people buy houses during the holidays. So if you're a seller and you're thinking, hey, I want to sell, it's probably better now than it's going to be in the next month or two. On the buyer's standpoint, you are likely to have less houses come on the market over the next couple months. Now, could you have some more negotiation power if things sit over the next month or two? You definitely could, but you also risk that next year. This happens every year. Once we get to January, you start to see the numbers go back up for sellers. Now, we can't read the future, but this happens basically every year, that buyers come into the market at the beginning of the year, and that demand makes prices go up. Days on market go down. The number of showings per listing go up. So you start to get more competition. And on the buyer side, it's great to be in the market now because if you find something, awesome. If you don't, you may have some more negotiation power over the next couple months. But if you wait all the way until next year, you're likely to have more competition coming into the market to compete with you on those houses. So I think it's interesting to see what supply and demand has done this year. And I would love to help you with your specific situation to see how your real estate needs fit into the Atlanta supply and demand. We'll keep you updated, and I'll see you again next week.